social construct that defines in society the power between men and women. And secondly, the gender roles are those that are prescribed again in terms of what men do in society, in the family and in society, and what women do in the family and in society. And you find this not only in the family, but ezikolweni, in our education, emisebenzini, in our work, in the state, whether it's a democratic or non-democratic state, in general. Ecaweni, you've seen ezicawos of Mansba, unomama abanxibe uniform ephelezelelayo, and baninzi, and in the middle ngutata he. And those are the gender rules that okay, even in church. Omama bazawuhamba bona bayocleana icawa, bafike otata bona sebengena nje Nkosi, uyabona ngabantu abafana. Gender relations, therefore, shape our beliefs, our culture, our minds, our knowledge system, our attitudes. Everything in society is shaped by these gender roles. Now, the last one is on patriarchy. Patriarchy on its own is a system that is of male domination and control in society. And it is based on what we've already talked about, the gender roles and the gender relations. And then you've got the overall system that determines how we behave in our society. Comrades, it does not matter where you go. You go to Europe, you go to Asia, you go wherever you go. Society, the current societies are under patriarchy. Whether they are the dictatorships that you find in the world, or democracies, or so-called socialist countries, but the patriarchal zone, which means uphethe otata bethuna. It does not matter how many women you have in decision making, but they are almost at the invitation of otata, because the behavior is determined by these gender roles and by this patriarchal society. But patriarchy manifests itself in different ways depending on the economic system of the particular country, as well as on the political system. Patriarchy on its own is a system, but it is also an ideology, but it is also a way of life, is over-embracing, holistic patriarchy. Is overall. So you can look at an ideology of society. You can look at the culture. For instance, apha in South Africa, kwakukhe kwakho into culture ethi amakhosikazi ayangeno. If at all umyeni wakho utshonile, uyangeno. That was patriarchal because akho nkosikazi ke ambiyongena utata. Bodata abangena omama. And the other, and then culture. The other one is ukuthwala. Ukuthwala is when a woman is taken, where the man wants to marry or to stay with her. This is why at the last conference, we actually had to have a slogan that says, asingeno, asithwalo, asingeno, asithwalo, asithwali, oh wait, asingeno, asithwalo, asingeni, asithwali. So masiyekane maqala. Now, gender struggles, therefore, are a fight to overhaul these patriarchal relations. Therefore, it is an antagonistic relationship. We cannot have democracy, the patriarchy. They should not coexist, but we'll see how they coexist, especially upper and in South Africa. In the discussion of the patriarchy over the years, Now, in the various systems, because women the world over have always been fighting for their rights and for the emancipation. This is to the extent that more than 102 years ago, kwabakhona, the International Women's Day, that was arising out of the fact that there were struggles for the franchise of women in America. So yagqibela seyadoptwe lento ye-International Women's Day by the United Nations. So that shows the length of struggles. But tina apha South Africa, we go over into 100 years, the patriarchy. Okokoko sabakhona siphila apha eMzantsi. Nangoku besingaphili. Our forefathers and foremothers, they lived under patriarchy. But it was slightly different. Because a patriarchy, as I say, is a parasite. It doesn't exist on its own. It exists within particular systems, economic and political and social systems. Number one, as you will see there, the different schools of thought. There's one that is saying, number one is saying gender blind. When we say a system is gender blind, is that it does not recognize this social construct, gender as a social construct, and the difference in terms of what women and men do in society. It does not, because it just says, singabantu, ribantu. And ipela apho, you talk about our masses, our people, but you don't break down. This is why when then you have e-programs, let's say for instance, as Lalin, you just go as Lalin in Emali, ufike uthi, nansi imali agriculture ke bethuna, nina bantu. And you don't realize that even as you give that money, because of gender relations, is going to be in the hands of men. And the programs that are going to be adopted are the programs that are defined by men. But that is gender blind. Ukhona ke another one. Gender blind existed in society long, especially before the 100 years that I'm talking about. Now, we focused on women. Let's see women we UN just before we went to Beijing in 1995, where we always talked about women and this. Don't forget women. What about women? Women, and then we're doing the bean counting of women. And this was a time where even the resources from the UN structures and international donors were based on what we call women in development. And this gives you an idea in that naba kosiyam amamakhoskazi otorholusizi ngawo ayalamba awafundanga atente maswanike izinto. So the women were something like inomlonyana of intake nomlomo ovuleyo, lahlela phaya for their education, lahlela phaya for their sewing. Nathi ke makhoskazi muzike enkosi yona sinceda enkosi. Women in development. It didn't go anywhere because it was a welfare approach that just says masizincede ezisialamu ziyagula zenza yonke women in development. And it was pushed especially by the donors. Semka apho torho yaphuma fashioning, because these things around gender, both in South Africa and internationally, ziyangena fashioning eziphuma. Kwabuya enye ngoku ethi gendered, which was saying that we must engender our policies, we must engender our program, we must engender our body. But again, we are guided here by the United Nations and the donor countries. Same gender. Who engender thing? Such we must mainstream. We must mainstream e-programs there too, where you integrate gender-related issues into the overall. Not quite different from the gendered one. But we were then saying here, whatever you do, you must say, what does it mean for women? How does it impact on gender relations in society? Because what we're about is to change. And when we were going to Parliament in 1994, the war of mainstreaming gender. We mainstreamed gender into our constitution, into our laws, and you can see in the early time that were in Parliament, about 94, 95, 96, the policies that came out were policies that were mainstreaming gender. We even had the gender budget. because by the time we went to Ekodesa, we then said to the men that were negotiating, and